At 9:47 p.m., Margaret Lewis felt it, the sharp, quiet moment when a life turns without warning. The house was still, too still, and the silence pressed against her ears like a held breath. In her Ohio home, the lights were low, the television muted, and her coffee had gone cold in her hands. Somewhere upstairs, her son was awake. And a mother's heart knew that whatever was happening behind that closed door would never fully be undone. Ethan Lewis had always been an easy child. He grew up polite, thoughtful, and careful with his words. Teachers praised him. Neighbors trusted him. He never rebelled, never shouted, never slammed doors. Margaret used to joke that he was born middle-aged, already worried about doing the right thing. But behind his gentle nature was a quiet loneliness that never fully left him. He felt things deeply and hid them even deeper. That night, he came home early from campus, earlier than usual. Margaret noticed right away. He didn't stop to chat, didn't grab a snack. He walked past her with a short smile and went straight upstairs. No music followed. No laughter. Just silence settling into the walls. Margaret stood there longer than she meant to, watching the staircase as if it might explain him. College was hard, she told herself. 19 was confusing. She had promised herself she wouldn't pry. Still, the air felt wrong. It's like something important had already happened, and she'd missed it. Upstairs, Ethan closed his bedroom door and leaned against it. His heart was racing, not from fear, but from truth. In his hand, his phone glowed with a message he had read at least 10 times already. Each time, it felt heavier and clearer at once. The message was from Claire Morgan. Claire wasn't someone he planned to care about. She sat 2 rows away in his literature class, always early, always focused. She had warm eyes and a calm voice. The kind of person who listened instead of waiting to talk. When she spoke to Ethan for the first time, it wasn't about class. It was about a line in a poem that made her feel understood. Ethan answered without thinking, and something opened between them. Over the next weeks, they talked more. Long walks across campus, quiet coffee shops, shared stories. Claire didn't rush him. She didn't ask him to perform or impress. With her, Ethan didn't feel small. Earlier that evening, they sat on a bench near the campus library. The sky was dark, the air cool. Claire had taken a slow breath before speaking. It's like someone stepping onto thin ice. "There's something you should know about me," she said. She didn't sound nervous. Just honest. She told him her truth, not dramatically, not with tears. Just as a fact of who she was and who she loved. She didn't ask him to decide anything. She didn't push. She simply trusted him with it. Ethan listened, heart pounding. The world didn't tilt the way he expected. Instead, it grew quiet, clear. He realized then that what scared him wasn't her truth. It was his own. Back in his room, Ethan sat on the bed and stared at his walls. Childhood posters still hung there. Reminders of a boy who tried to stay simple and safe. His whole life, he had followed paths that felt expected. He avoided conflict, avoided deep questions, avoided himself. But Claire's honesty had stripped away his excuses. The message on his phone read, "I can't stop thinking about you either." He typed his replies slowly. Each word felt like a step forward. Downstairs, Margaret climbed the stairs halfway and stopped. Light spilled from under Ethan's door. She almost knocked, almost said his name. Her hand hovered in the air, her heart full of questions she didn't know how to ask. Then she stepped back. Some doors, she knew, had to stay closed until the person inside was ready. Ethan set his phone down and lay back, staring at the ceiling. His chest felt tight but alive. For the first time, he wasn't trying to be what the world expected. He wasn't hiding from the questions that followed him for years. He didn't have answers yet, but he finally had courage. He thought about how he would look at himself tomorrow, about what it meant to choose honesty over comfort, about how love could arrive quietly and still change everything. Time passed without sound. Margaret went to bed later than usual. She lay awake, staring into the dark, thinking about how fast children grow and how little warning parents get before they do. She sensed a shift she couldn't name. Not danger, not pain. Just change, deep and permanent. Upstairs, Ethan closed his eyes with a calm he had never known. Whatever came next, he would meet it as himself. That was the night the careful boy began to fade, and the man he was meant to be finally stepped forward. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows of the Lewis house, golden and steady as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Margaret poured her coffee, her hands shaking slightly, trying to ignore the quiet hum in her chest. She had watched her son all night in her thoughts, replaying every moment, every look, every message. Wondering how much of him had shifted in just a few hours, Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding himself differently taller, steadier, more present. He looked the same at first glance, same brown hair, same soft eyes, but Margaret could feel it. There was a new confidence in his steps, a subtle warmth in his smile, a calm behind his gaze. "Morning, Mom," he said. His voice wasn't different in tone, but it carried a weight of certainty that made Margaret pause. She smiled back, a mix of relief and curiosity, because she could sense the story behind those few words. No hesitation, no shadows. For the first time in years, he didn't seem like a boy trying to fit into a mold. He seemed like a young man who had just discovered the first pieces of himself. Breakfast was quiet. Not awkward, but intentionally gentle, like both of them were savoring the pause before the next step. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she poured eggs onto plates, listening to the soft scrape of silverware on ceramic. Ethan ate slowly, thoughtfully, occasionally glancing at her, measuring her mood. Margaret could see the new edges in him, not arrogance, not distance, but strength tempered with care. It was as if the storm of the previous night had polished him, smoothed the rough edges of doubt, and left behind a quiet brilliance. "I'm meeting someone today," Ethan said after a pause, his words steady, deliberate. "Someone important." There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, only honesty. Margaret's heart skipped. She felt the unspoken weight behind the statement. The connection that had sparked, the courage it took for him to admit it aloud. "Hope she treats you well," Margaret replied softly, her voice cracking a fraction, because a mother knows the significance of moments like this. She was proud, worried, and anxious all at once. Proud because her son was stepping into adulthood with clarity. Anxious because she knew life could still break hearts. "She already has," Ethan said, and for the first time he looked her fully in the eyes, unguarded, open. Margaret felt a lump in her throat. Something inside her shifted, a mix of relief and awe. Her son, the careful boy who had always tiptoed around the edges of life, had found someone who saw him fully. Later that afternoon, Ethan drove to the small park near campus where he and Claire had often walked before. The autumn leaves crunched under their feet, and the crisp air carried the faint smell of damp grass and changing seasons. Claire waited near the fountain, her hands stuffed in her jacket pockets, her eyes scanning the path until they landed on him. She smiled, that quiet, knowing smile that made Ethan feel seen. "Hi," he said, stepping closer. His nerves were calm now, steadier than they had been in months. He could breathe without holding himself back. He could speak without rehearsing every word. "Hi," Claire replied softly, and for a moment they just looked at each other. No rush, no pressure. Just presence. They walked slowly, brushing hands now and then, laughing lightly at small jokes and observations. Ethan told her about the night before, how it had felt like standing on the edge of something unknown, and then stepping into it. He didn't exaggerate, didn't dramatize. He spoke honestly, with the rawness of someone who had faced his own fear and come out stronger. Claire listened without interrupting, nodding, holding his words carefully as if they were fragile treasures. She asked questions not to test him, but to understand. And Ethan realized that her interest wasn't about changing him or controlling him. It was about seeing him, fully, completely. For the first time, he felt the truth of love that wasn't about need, but about presence and acceptance. "I was always scared," he admitted, voice low, of stepping too far, saying too much, becoming someone I wasn't ready to be. He stopped, searching her eyes for judgment. There was none, only understanding. You don't have to become anyone else, Claire said softly. You just need to let yourself be seen. That's all. Ethan's chest lifted slightly, the tension leaving him in waves he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For years he had avoided his own emotions, kept them locked behind a careful wall. But with her, the wall didn't feel necessary. He could just exist. And it was enough. The hours passed unnoticed. They walked the park paths, sitting on benches, talking quietly about books, dreams, and fears. Each word, each glance, each laugh was a thread weaving a connection that neither of them needed to force. It was simple. It was honest. It was transformative. Back at home, Margaret paced in the living room, occasionally glancing at the clock. She knew Ethan had left, but she didn't check her phone. She wanted to wait, to experience the return as it happened, naturally. And when he finally walked through the door, Margaret caught a glimpse of something that made her chest tighten, a new light in his eyes. Ethan came inside with a calm energy, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He paused and hugged his mother, a long, warm embrace he hadn't offered in years. Margaret held him, feeling the weight of the past slip away, replaced by this new version of her son. The careful boy was still there, but now he carried something more: strength, courage, and a quiet certainty that came from being understood. "Mom," he said, voice low but steady, "thank you for letting me be me." Margaret smiled through tears, feeling a deep swell of pride and love. "You've always been you," she whispered. "I'm just glad you can see it too." That night, the house settled into sleep once again. Margaret lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the quiet shift in the air. Some nights change everything. Some nights arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, but leave a mark that can never be erased. Ethan lay in his room, phone set aside, heart steady and alive. The night before had begun with hesitation and uncertainty, but now it ended with clarity. He knew who he was, what he wanted, and that he had someone who saw him fully. He understood that love wasn't about perfection, but honesty. That bravery wasn't about grand gestures, but about allowing himself to be vulnerable. Margaret closed her eyes, imagining the life her son would now build. Knowing it would be filled with honesty, connection, and moments like this, quiet, transformative, and real. Some nights didn't just end childhood. They began adulthood. They began trust, understanding, and the kind of love that shapes a life quietly, but forever. And in that calm golden moment, the Lewis family understood something essential. Change doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it arrives gently in the form of a heart opening, a truth accepted, and a son finally stepping into his own life. That afternoon, that evening, that night, it had all begun with a quiet courage that no one else could see, but everyone would feel forever.